Hey, what's up? Jeff Lerner here, and I shot a video to answer the all-important question, do you need a college degree? Now, if you're seeing this and you don't have a college degree, then it's a very directly relevant question. If you're seeing this now, and actually I know YouTube tells me that my average viewer is between like 25 and 44. So many of you watching this may already have a college degree, in which case, this could be a video for your kids. But regardless, it is a really, really relevant question in the world that we live in because the cost of a college education is getting so high, and there are all these big companies that are no longer requiring college degrees. So I wanted to dig in to the actual facts and the actual practical realities in the workforce of whether or not you need a college degree. And the answer is, so do you need a college degree? Well, the answer is you need a college degree if you're going to do something that requires a college degree. How about that for being obvious and self-evident? You know, there's a lot of talk in the entrepreneurial information and entertainment circles. Like if you go on YouTube and you watch these videos of Elon Musk and Richard Branson and Bill Gates and Tai Lopez and Mark Zuckerberg. And by the way, of the names that I just named, only Elon Musk actually has a college degree. And there's these mashup videos of people talking about how college degrees are irrelevant and college degrees are overpriced. I think it's not quite that simple. There are certainly things that people want to do that require a college degree. For example, my 11-year-old daughter, she's already decided that she wants to be a nurse. She's going to need a degree for that. I think that there are certain industries and professions where it's great to become qualified on your own and go in and pass tests and whatnot. But even something like nursing that's actually involves life or death care, pretty important that that be standardized and governed by very specific, almost authoritarian bodies with really rigid standards and delivered through very structured education. And you could argue degree, certification, what exactly that standard and structure needs to be. But I don't think it's something where you just come in off the street and pass a test. Like, I'm fine with that. There are certainly a lot of things where you don't need a college degree. And there's so many more things where you don't need a college degree than there ever have been before. And the other thing I think that's a little bit, maybe a little bit oversimplified in all of this sort of entrepreneur rah-rah stuff online is they always hold up these people. They're like, well, you can be successful without a college degree because Larry Ellison did it and Steve Jobs did it and Bill Gates did it and Paul Allen did it. And those are all founders. Clearly, you don't have to have a degree to get hired at your own company that you found. You're not going to fire yourself for not having a degree. But I think that's an oversimplification to say, well, these wildly successful people didn't have college degrees. Like I do have a college degree, but it was in jazz piano. So I hardly consider it to be, to function in the way that a college degree maybe should. But it doesn't matter. I own my own business. I'm not going to call myself to task for not having the degree, right? Most people aren't founding billion-dollar tech companies. So I don't know that that's particularly useful. I think the much more interesting and relevant question is, what about employees, people that are getting hired? Because even people that, frankly, if you dig into a lot of those guys' backgrounds, they had successful enough backgrounds and they had stable enough support systems that they were able to, and this isn't true for all of them. I mean, Larry Ellison, founder of Oracle, didn't come from a lot of money, and there's people that kind of scrapped and clawed their way up. Bill Gates, for example, he dropped out of Harvard, but his dad was the president of the largest bank in Washington State. I think Bank of the Northwest, or was in Seattle. And some of these guys had major support systems that allowed them to do other, take some time, right? They could drop out of college. By the way, a lot of these guys, they got into very prestigious colleges. So they were on a very studious track, and if you get into Harvard, you're still ahead. Even if you drop out after 2 years, you're still much further along in your academic development than probably most people that graduate from a community college. And not just your academic development, but your network and your resources and your background and your safety net and all these things, right? It's not like strictly apples to apples. A lot of these things that kind of, like I say, they kind of reduce the question to very black and white answers. But the reality is, in the world that we live in, there are a lot of companies now that don't require college degrees, and like big companies like Google, for example. And that may not surprise you because you think, well, IT and code and development, those are things that are very like quantitatively based, where you can either do it or you don't, or you can. It's like speaking a language. You either speak the language of code or you don't. But there's actually a lot of positions at Google that have nothing to do with coding or being a developer or even being in information technology. Things like compliance, being certain types of analysts, soft science kind of stuff like PR and marketing that don't require a college degree. Ernst & Young, financial accounting, which traditionally you'd think of accounting as something that's very, very sort of old school and traditional and rooted in trust and responsibility and the last type of company that's going to buck the trend. But EY or Ernst & Young, they, at least in all of their UK offices, they don't require college degrees anymore. Penguin Random House Publishing, Costco, Hilton, and I'm not just talking about being like a cash register clerk at Costco. I'm talking about even like working at the optometry center at Costco, quality control, stockers, people that manage the systems, the inventory tracking systems, Hilton hotels. You can manage a hotel with a $50 million P&L without a college degree. Publix, the grocery store chain, Apple, Starbucks. And again, I'm not talking about just the baristas at Starbucks. I'm talking you can get high up in Starbucks now without a college degree. Nordstrom, Home Depot, IBM, Bank of America, again, kind of like Ernst & Young. These are Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 companies that you can get hired into very good upper to mid-level jobs and rise through the ranks without a college degree now. So it does change the question from a black and white question. Like, frankly, a lot of older generations like to try to make it kind of a black and white question. Not to make this too much about me, but I was married once before my current wife, and I had a father-in-law who was very like, thou shalt finish college. Thou is a loser if thou does not finish college. And I literally finished college just to make this guy happy. And I remember that very dogmatic, frankly, pretty unsophisticated worldview that's like all or nothing, black and white. It's very polarized extremes. But I think now in the world, and maybe there's some reason for that. If people come from a world that was 30 or 40 years ago, it's like, well, that's how they grew up. That's how they were taught. That was actually the truth back then. But it's not the truth anymore. It's not nearly that straightforward. So I think now what we have to look at is it's very circumstantial. You have to look at the economics. You have to look at your goals. You have to look at the relevant industries. You have to look at the types of companies that you'd like to work for. You have to look at ultimately what you want to do with your life and try to have a little more sophisticated analysis of your own life to decide if it makes sense. So let's do that, all right? So first of all, there's the cost of a university education. And cost, I think, means a couple things. One, it means the actual amount of money that you're going to have to pay out. But the other is the opportunity cost, both in terms of getting the degree or going to school because you delay your entry into the workforce and your ability to start earning, but also the opportunity cost of going into the workforce without having it. So that's actually three components. There's the money you lay out. There's the cost of delaying your earning potential while you take the time to go to school. But then there's, on the flip side, the cost of trying to get started earning without the degree and what it's going to do, how it's going to reduce your earning potential. So we have to fit all those three pieces of the equation together to come up with a calculus for our own personal situation. So let's start with the cost. Public in-state tuition at the typical four-year school is about $80,000 for 4 years. It's roughly about $20,000 a year for tuition, books, room and board, and other kind of miscellaneous fees. $20K a year for 4 years, about $80,000. That's if you go to a state school in your own state. Now, if you go to a private school, typically you're looking at about $200,000 for 4 years. It's about $50,000 a year, again, for tuition, room and board, books, and fees. Where are you going to come up with the money? Like, you either got to have it, in which case you got to say, well, if I have $200,000, what could I earn by investing $200,000? Honestly, if you have $200,000, you could put 25% down on 4 $200,000 rental properties. And with 25% down, I mean, depending on the market that you're in, even if you pay 6, 7, 8% for property management, you could have the equivalent of a job. You could have $3,000 to $5,000 a month, maybe at least $2,000 to $4,000 a month in income now, pretty much for the rest of your life. So immediately talking about opportunity costs, you say, okay, taking $200,000 a year, or even let's say it's $100,000, and now you could have 2 properties, and that's still $1,000 to $2,000 a month in passive income if you properly invested in the rental properties. And that's not the only thing you could do with it, but it's not the point of this video to analyze all the things you could do with it. But I'm just saying, so you have to like appraise the present value of creating a long-term future cash flow for yourself with that same money that you're going to spend on college, and compare that to the additional income you're going to make for having been to college, right? Well, it's just not a conversation to oversimplify. And for the record, you're going to generally make statistically about $400 per week more starting salary with a college degree than without, which is, what's that, about $1,600 to $1,800 a month. So again, taking that same money that you used to go to college and investing it into rental properties, could you make $1,600 to $1,800 in additional cash flow per month? And in that case, be getting it in a more tax advantageous way, and with the ability to write off depreciation and write off the mortgage interest and do all the things that are specific to real estate. You could just on the surface of that and say, okay, take the money for college, which is going to give me about $400 per week more in starting salary, or put it into rental properties. You could actually make a pretty good argument, because the other thing about it is, to get the salary, you have to work. If you own rental properties, you could break your leg. You could lose your job. You could go out of the country for 3 months and still earn it. So there's also a benefit there where it's like, one is compensation for work. The other is compensation just for being alive, right? So one's passive. So, again, just purely in terms of the numbers, you could make an argument right there to just say, take that money and invest it into real estate. But even that would be oversimplifying it, because again, my 11-year-old daughter, she wants to be a nurse. So she's like, I don't want rental properties. I want to help people. I want to take care of people. I want to be a nurse. Okay, well, but at least that's one layer of consideration. And then, the other thing that I think consider, you hear a lot about the unemployment data. People say, oh, well, you're twice as likely to not have a job if you don't have a college degree. And that's true. The unemployment rate for people with a 4-year bachelor's degree, and this was a couple of years ago, this was prior to, and depending on when you're seeing this video, I'm shooting this video right now kind of in the midst of the COVID craziness, and the economy's kind of shut down, and we just had massive unemployment. So I'm not going off of statistics right now, because this is an anomaly. But in general, as of a few years ago, you have about a 2.8% unemployment rate with a 4-year bachelor's degree, whereas you have about a 5.4% unemployment rate with a high school diploma but no bachelor's. So you can look at that and go, oh my gosh, you're almost twice as likely to be unemployed without a bachelor's. Oh man, you should totally get a bachelor's, right? And that's usually how that data gets spun. Like, unemployment rate with a bachelor's, 2.8%. Unemployment rate with just a high school diploma is 5.4%. It's almost twice as much. But people pull out of the data what they want to find in the data, and depending on how they present it. The reality is the difference between 2.8% and 5.4% isn't as dramatic as it sounds, because the real stat, you're not trying to become unemployed. So you're not going, oh, well, if I have a bachelor's, I have a 2.8% chance of being unemployed. But if I only have a high school diploma, I have a 5.4% chance of being unemployed. And that's twice as much, because you're not trying to be unemployed. You're trying to be employed, right? So with a high school diploma, flip those numbers. You have a 94.6% chance of being employed with a high school diploma. You have a 97.2% chance of being employed with a bachelor's. So it's not twice as much. It's actually only a couple percentage points more. You're like 95% likely to be employed with a high school diploma, and you're basically 97% likely to be employed with a bachelor's. So again, when people write articles saying that you're twice as likely to be unemployed without a bachelor's, those people are usually advocates for you going to college. But actually, if you look at the stat and go, well, I'm not trying to be unemployed, I'm trying to be employed. So what are my odds of being employed in these situations? It's actually only 2%, about 2.5% better with a bachelor's, right? So you have to be careful how you allow people to present data to you. I'm not denying what it is. With a bachelor's, you're slightly more likely to get a job, and that job is likely to pay you about $400 per week more. But you can still make the argument that if I took that same amount of money and invested it into real estate or some other reasonable rate of return investment, let's say maybe 8%, 9% a year, I'd at least offset the income difference, but also I would make it more stable and more passive. And it couldn't be interrupted if I lose my job, for example. And by the way, Warren Buffett is on record. I'm about to quote Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett's on record as saying that he doesn't particularly worry about whether or not people have college degrees when he hires and when he interviews and when he interviews management of companies. He's just looking at credentials. But as he says, the number one rule of making money is to not lose money. And the number two rule is refer back to number one, right? So he's like adamant about not losing money. So coming out of the gate, being negative $100,000 to $200,000, either because you had it and you spent it, or you didn't have it and you borrowed it and now you have debt, you can kind of make an argument that that's a way to set yourself back right out of the gate, and nothing erodes long-term earning potential more than setting yourself back. Again, so my general analysis says that as a purely financial equation with no considerations around career choice or passion or interest or what you want to do in your life, college is actually kind of a hard economic argument to make. So let's say you start out, let's say you do have to borrow the money, right? You get student loans. And from what I didn't take student loans. I did go to college. I did get a degree, but I was fortunate to be able to get a scholarship because I played piano. And as long as I played piano in the jazz orchestra at my university, I was able to get my college paid for. So I didn't have to borrow the money, and I also didn't have to pay the money, which is frankly, just my father-in-law's admonition aside, it's the only reason I was open to finishing is because I knew I wasn't having to pay for it. So let's say you do have to borrow the money. If you start out in life with between $100,000 and $200,000 in debt, and from what I looked at in student loans, typically you're paying it around 4 to 6% interest, and they usually have it on about a 20-year amortization term. So at 5% interest and 20-year term, $100,000 to $200,000 in debt is roughly between $600 and $1,300 a month in payments that are gonna last into your 40s. So even if you're earning an extra $1,800 per month in income on average because of your college diploma, seems like about half of that or even a little more, if you had to borrow the money, is going back out to student loan payments. And that's for the first 20 years of your earning career. And frankly, it could be, if you try to shorten the term, it could be all of the additional income. So again, it kind of favors the argument of taking that money and putting it into investments as soon as possible. And the other thing is, and I mentioned this earlier, delaying your earning potential, delaying your entry into the workforce from 18 to 22, that's 4 years when you have a lot of energy, you're likely not married, you likely don't have kids, you're likely in the best position you'll ever be in your life to live really lean and to save money. Again, unless you're my daughter and you want to be a nurse, or you're just absolutely decided that you want to, be an attorney and you got to go on that track to get into law school. Although I wouldn't be surprised if they don't at some point make it so that you can get into law school with just transferable work experience and a good LSAT score. So I think the day is coming when the bachelor's degree is going to become even less requisite than it is. Basically, unless you're in want to go into a career field that absolutely requires it, I just don't think you can make the economic argument anymore for going to college. And probably the best way I know to sum this up is in my business, I have between 80 and 90 people on payroll. Most of them, staff, a few of them contractors, some of them vendors, but between 80 and 90 people that we pay every month. I have never asked one person in my organization about their degree as part of any sort of hiring process. Now, it might come up casually in conversation. I do happen to know that some of the people that work for me have been to college, but it's never been on my list of things to inquire about when I'm hiring. And again, that's 80 or 90 people in a large and growing organization. And that covers a pretty wide gamut of employee roles or different roles that we have. I'm talking our sales team, our media, content, production team, our operations team, systems, networking, our IT, our programmers and developers, all of our admin, all of our sales operations, copywriters, designers, People with a lot of technical skills, and certainly there's very specialized requirements for some of the roles that we hire for, but we just don't care if they got them in college or not. And that's the thing I have the most intimate knowledge of. But yeah, I mean, you come work for me, I'm not gonna ask to see your diploma. I have a diploma somewhere. It's in a red tube. They gave it to me, I guess I graduated 13 years ago now, probably 14 years ago. I've never taken it out of the tube. I don't have it framed on the wall. It's just not, it's not that I like begrudge it. I did, it didn't cost me anything. So I was okay doing it, but it did cost me some time, but it's just not that big a deal. That's the best way I know to say it. So all that to say, if you came here hoping I would give you a crystal clear answer that you could just go one way or the other with and remove all the responsibility of your own analysis or creative thought, I realize I have not done that. But hopefully I've given you some good food for thought and at least maybe supported the alternative perspective that maybe college isn't as important as some people like to make it out to be, some of the more traditional, old school, and especially people that come from establishment education. Like if you're in high school, you're probably always being told that college is the next thing. And here's probably the best way I can sum it up. And this is more of like an ideological perspective, but it's kind of my assessment. It's what I believe. If you're average in this world, then what you're worried about is the floor. You're like, I want to raise the floor underneath me because I know I'm average. I know I'm not going to like excel or be great or be exceptional or be the outlier. I'm gonna be worried about what's beneath me that I can't fall below. If you're average and you're worried about the floor underneath you, go get a degree. It's statistically going to raise the floor underneath you by approximately $400 per week for the rest of your life. If you're excellent, you're not worried about the floor. And I'm not saying I'm excellent at all things, but I'm excellent at certain things that have made it such that I've never really worried about the floor underneath me. I'm a lot more interested in the ceiling above me, and ideally that there not be one. And if you're excellent, you don't need a college degree because college isn't going to increase the ceiling. There is no ceiling on the value of excellence in this world. So you got to look at your own life. It's a combination of who am I, how am I, and what industry am I trying to move forward in. And if you're in an industry that doesn't strictly require a college degree, and you know that you're excellent, and you know that whatever environment you put yourself into, you're going to excel and you're going to frankly outperform, you don't need to worry that much about the floor. So you don't need to go spend time and money to get a college degree that's going to boost the floor up because you're worried about the ceiling. And if you're great, there isn't one. All right. Hopefully that helps. Man, if you've enjoyed this, hit subscribe. I'd love to have you back for other videos. Let me know. Feel free to leave a comment, ask a question, give me a like, and tune back in for more videos. I'm here to help you have a more awesome life, and I look forward to seeing you there. Take care.